chickened out in coming, but it sort of goes like this. In 1862, Darwin, Charles, found an orchid in Madagascar. Well, it was sent to him, actually. That was a very large orchid, and he postulated in 1862 that there must be a pollinator with a 12-inch tongue. And of course, the natural world, being what it is, was entirely skeptical about that. And he said it was going to be a hawk's moth. And 132 years later, this is what happened. So I'm actually a big Wallace guy. I'm not a big Darwin guy. I just got back from the Galapagos, and quite frankly, everything's named after Darwin, or the Galapagos. But he got this one right, and I was quite impressed. And this has absolutely nothing to do with the talk, other than the fact that I don't have a tongue that long, but mine's just as sharp. So stay tuned. Yeah. All righty. So we have a quorum, do you think?
Yeah, go for it.
You reckon? That's what we should do.
You don't think about people here anyway.
Yeah, all right, so if this thing boots up, and half the topic today is on corruption, and this PowerPoint presentation is corrupt as well, so that just works fine for me. Let's just see if we can find out what we're doing. I'm going to need that extra time, I think.
Your glasses are on your forehead.
Yeah, I know. I don't need glasses. I need glasses. Yeah, let's try this.
So this hair can see well.
Please work. Please work.
Yeah, there's big of them.
Please don't crap up.
Yeah, pretty cool. Yeah, shot them in Africa. Nice. Almost a photograph.
Cool. They must really look up.
Showtime. Well, I'd like to welcome you all here, all of you. I didn't expect all of you, but I'm glad you're all here. I'd like to begin by thanking the Nanaimo North Library for continuing to host this, although I think in the future we're going to have to charge them more. I'd like to thank my subatomic particle physicist Murray Welty and my Amy Guru for coming to the rescue yet again in my sort of Luddite ineptitude. And I'd like to thank a bunch of other people, but that will come with time. So, if you punch in Madagascar to Google in the West, you will get this.
I like to move it, I like to move it, move it. You like to move it. I like to move it, move it. I like to move it, move it. I like to move it, move it. You like to move it.
No. So I invite you to just sit back for about a minute. I'm going to crank this one up a little bit. Or not. And enjoy this.
Cool.
Right in character.
Well, let's come back to that. Cannabis has obviously been legal for far too long at DreamWorks because there are no lions in Madagascar. There are no giraffes in Madagascar. There are no hippos in Madagascar. There are no zebras in Madagascar. There are no lorises in Madagascar, and there sure as hell ain't no penguins. There are eyes, which is this little creature there, thought to be extinct in 1933, rediscovered in 1951. And there are ring-tailed lemurs. But there are no king ring-tailed lemurs because lemurs are matriarchal. In fact, the monarchy of Madagascar was matriarchal. So there was no King Julian at all. Not only that, but there are 22 million people in Madagascar, a fact that the DreamWorks people seem to conveniently elude themselves when they made this movie, which could have been equally named Maldives. So this is not the real McCoy. The reason there are no lions, and the reason there are no hippos, and the reason there's no zebras in Madagascar is because of continental shift and drift. And I don't know if you all remember Pangaea, but this is Pangaea.
What do you remember?
What do you remember about Pangaea? So way back here at 120 million years ago, you can see that Madagascar was more aligned physically with India than it was with Africa. And if you follow the course of what's happened since then, Madagascar has evolved totally separate from the rest of the world. In fact, 90% of their species, 90% of the biodiversity exists nowhere else on Earth, which was one of the reasons why I wanted to go there. The reason there's no lemurs in Africa is because of monkeys. And with all due respect to the Non-Animal Bulletin, they had a monkey business sort of on the top of it. It's not monkey business. The monkeys killed all the lemurs in Africa. And the reason that there are lemurs in Madagascar is because there were no monkeys in Madagascar. So that's how the animals got there. How the people got there was basically in two migrations. About 3,000 years ago, from southern Borneo, there were ships like this, similar to the Polynesian ships that cruised the Pacific, that landed on the northern tip of Madagascar. And about 1,500 years later, the southern Bantus came across. Now the Malays brought rice, and the Bantus brought cattle, zebu. So that's the origin of their cuisine. If you ask an average Malagasy if he considers himself an African, he will take your head off. He considers himself a Malay.
Oh.
It gets kind of difficult when you have, there are 14 tribes, and 2 of them are pretty African. There's the Sakalava and the Bara. But they also consider themselves Malay rather than African. So how did we get to Madagascar? Well, we didn't go on a sailing ship. We flew. Didn't take us 6.5 days from Paris. It took us 9 hours. It was quite an ordeal, and we woke up with this view. And it looks beautiful, doesn't it? Until you consider the fact that all the heating and cooking comes from charcoal. There's virtually no electricity, and where it exists infrequently. The average person living in those houses eats rice 363 days a year and may have meat 2 days a year. And it's a hotbed of all kinds of criminal activity. But it is beautiful, I will grant you that. And the view from, this view actually was from the place we stayed at, which was one of the Queen's palaces for her musicians, turned into a boutique hotel. So, what's a bandit? Well, a bandit is a person who takes by force from A what A has taken by guile from B. And when I first got to Madagascar, I had no idea of corruption and banditry. I didn't even think about that. I was going for the lemurs, and I'll tell you why in a minute. But once I got to Madagascar, I found there were a few kinds of corruptions and a few kinds of banditry that went on. And I won't have time to go into all of these, but all of these are in the book. And the Malagasy have a joke about themselves. They say, well, on the island of Nosy Bay, there was an old man walking down the beach. And he looked down at the sand and he found an oil lamp that was sort of half out of the dirt. So he pulled it out and he began to rub it, and what do you know, poof, out comes a genie. And the genie says to the man, he says, I will grant you one wish. This is Madagascar. And the man said, well, you know, it's simple, I just want to live forever. And the genie said, I'm really sorry, but I'm not empowered to grant those kinds of wishes. Do you have another wish? And the man said, well, I'd like to live long enough until there's no more corruption in Madagascar. And the genie said, sneaky bastard. So that's an example of Malagasy humor. So the first bandits were actually the royalty that were the Marina tribe. And this is a fellow by the name of Andrew Minapurio Marina, because their names are that long. The first who actually unified the country, except for parts of the Bara tribes and the Sakalava, and created an empire. And he had his palace with mixtures of Norwegian and French influence at a place called Ambohimanga, just north of the capital. And you see the zebu worship, the cattle worship that went on there. On our wall the first night was a charcoal drawing of this lady who, I didn't know at first, but her name is Rana Luvana, the third. She was the third queen and the last ruling monarch of Madagascar, because when the French came in 1896, they exiled her to Algiers, and she died at the age of 55 of an embolism, and she was buried there, exhumed and brought back to Madagascar. When the castle, when the Rova